Hey, Digital Summer. We are here with, I think, would probably be the best panel of the day, but don't tell anybody else. We're talking about local impact today, and I am joined by an all-star cast of characters. I'm joined by Kimmo Leinonen, who is the esports. Yeah, I got it right. The esports planner for the city of Espoo in Finland. Tomaso Portunato, who is the co-founder of Platform Bar in London. Taryn McCarty, who is the head of community development for Nerd Street Gamers out of Philadelphia. And last but not least, Chris Kissack, who is the esports advisor for the Digital Isle of Man. Welcome, everybody. I mean, come on, you gotta welcome. You gotta say something.
Whoa, thanks, whoa.
Gotta look like we're having fun, guys.
Yeah.
You're so chilled,
Taryn.
Kerry.
Yeah, I am chilling very hard. It's Digital Summer, man. Taryn, let's start with you. How about a little introduction about what Nerd Street is doing in Philadelphia and what you do in your role?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Taryn McCarty. I lead our community development efforts at Nerd Street Gamers. And what I'm focused on is expanding as much of our footprint as possible across the nation. At Nerd Street Gamers, we have our local hosts, which are our LAN facilities, and we have about 10 of them right now, and we're expanding to about 70 in the next 4 years. So I want to make sure that every community understands who and what we are, and they're plugging into our existing infrastructure. So that could be anything from working with a high school to a local Parks and Rec department into a city who might have an initiative such as that. And, we want to get these kids involved in our event structure, which are lead up to our summer and winter championship series, and then eventually understand what broadcast rules are. And then understand that esports is an entire industry that they don't have to be a professional streamer on, right? They can have a career in marketing. They can have a career in business development. So really just feeding the pipeline for esports across the country.
Awesome. Very cool. Kimmo, let's go with you next.
So yeah, I'm Kimmo, and I'm an esports planner, which is something. It feels weird even for me still, and I work for the Espoo city's sports department, and I'm basically the specialist for esports for the whole city of Espoo. I help all the departments in esports related operations. I help to find them partners, spar ideas, ranging from like youth work to high schools to businesses. I help them to connect with local or international partners. So I basically try to do everything in a big city.
So, cool, amazing. Chris, let's zigzag here. What do you got going on, Chris?
So I'm Chris Kissack. I advise Digital Isle of Man, which is a agency within the Isle of Man government, and very much like Kimmo, except for an island. So I work with grassroots initiatives. I work with businesses, educating them on opportunities in esports. I support other local kind of champions that want to see esports grow on an island and opportunities for young people, and educate different departments within government as well. The oldest government in the world. We've got a lot of great things here on the island. So I'm a busy guy. That's me, and I'm really excited to be on this panel as well.
Excited to have you. Last but not least, Tomaso. Tell us a little bit about Platform.
Right. So hi, I'm Tomaso, one of the co-founders of Platform. Platform is a video gaming and esports bar business. We currently have one bar operating in London. Our main focus is to be the most inclusive gaming space possible. So while we do esports, our kind of main goal is to make gaming and esports as mainstream as possible. So we invite everyone, doesn't matter the kind of a skill, age, gender. So we have a really kind of diverse type of customer base. And our aim is to be a little bit what the cinemas are to the movies industry. So it's a really mainstream, accessible for everyone. You don't have to be the biggest movie fan to go to the cinemas and enjoy time with your friends. My job at Platform is basically kind of leading the business forward, making sure it can survive a pandemic, and now kind of looking forward at what are the next move for the business. So we're very much more of a hospitality focused business, but we're gonna be kind of switching to the community aspect whenever we're fully back on track.
Well, you are doing a great job because you guys have survived the pandemic. So mission accomplished there.
You know,
Yeah, still there.
It's
Everyone's still here. We're doing a great job, guys. We should all be proud of ourselves. Something I wanted to talk about in terms of let's take a big picture look first before we really dial into the local impact of what everyone's operations are doing, where they are headquartered. Is a goal of everyone's operation to develop their locale into a sort of esports mecca and develop it into the place to be if you want to be involved in esports, or the place to be modeled after, or the place to be jealous that your friends moved there? Or is it more about this is where we are and our operations need a headquarters for our global esports operations, or our regional or national esports operations? Let's start where we left off. Tomaso, let's start with you. What is a big picture for Platform's operations in London?
Well, we've discussed that mainly in the past. Before the pandemic, we were in a multiple discussion with a lot of esports stakeholders, from esports teams, from amateur to pros, game developers that are working within esports, schools and universities who want to get involved with esports. So there's been this kind of this term of ecosystem that's been bounced out quite a lot. So different spots in London, from the Wembley area around the stadium, or different spots across London. We had a discussion where you have a game developer, you have an amateur team, a pro team, us being in the mix to try and create this kind of ecosystem of gaming and esports. I think it is beneficial in a way because it creates more traffic to the space. But on a pure business standpoint, and coming from me, who do most of the kind of business side of the platform, I just feel like everyone is a little bit worried about doing the first move. So everyone's like, oh, it would be great if we had Red Games and Platform and Fnatic and XL all together. But at the end of the day, this is our business models to run mainly in a kind of brick and mortar world where you have high rents. It's when you select a location for any retail or hospitality business, you don't care that much about who's next door, right? A little bit, but it's mostly about the area, the footfall, type of activity in the area, rent level, business rate, all of these parameters in the equation. And I feel that when we talk too much about the ecosystem, we kind of put a blind eye towards the actual metrics that will make your business survive in the medium long term. And I think the magic also of gaming and esports is that we don't have to be physically next to each other to be playing against each other. So these facilities don't have to be next to each other. And I'm sure Taryn with Nerd Street, you guys have facilities across the country, and you guys are competing against different facilities. You don't have to be physically next to each other, which is one of the key aspects of the industry.
Yeah, let's bounce to you, Taryn. What's your input there?
I think for us, we're just trying to make sure that esports is accessible to anyone who wants to play, right? If you have your traditional community that you already have an existing night with, come play at localhost. But if you're a 5-year-old and you're trying to figure out what is this, or even if you're a 50-year-old and you're trying to figure out what is this, there's really no place that you can go and say, hey, I'd love to learn more about this and play a game and understand how competing works. We have a big partnership with Philadelphia Parks and Rec Department, and a huge learning from us is we could host as many tournaments as we want, but those kids had no idea what Discord is. That was extremely important for us to be able to introduce that to them. So how do we empower kids to understand these different platforms that we need in order to compete? Because this might be life-changing to a kid. It might present a college opportunity. It might present a monetary opportunity. So for us, yes, we're interested in all of it. And I think, like Tomaso said, we're really incentivized towards growing as quickly as possible across the country because we really want to be able to give those opportunities to those that might not be have those opportunities.
And Chris, what's an island got to do with esports? A small island of 85,000 people, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, that's right.
Are you guys building it so that they come, or what are you guys doing?
Bit of both. I mean, sports is in the island's DNA. For such a small island, we've got a good track record in traditional sports, whether or not it's the TT, creating Olympic level athletes. So it hasn't been too difficult for me and my colleagues to showcase the island as a space that if you're a team, if you're an org and you're looking for a location to boot camp, as an example, the island's quite attractive. We've got good internet. It's safe. It's a really safe space. So if you want to drop a team somewhere where they're not going to get maybe the distractions and it's cost effective to boot camp. But the challenge we had, if I'm speaking to a big org, is, okay, well, what are you doing in your back garden? What's your grassroots? What kind of, just to sort of, to echo what Taryn was saying, that it's so important to create these safe spaces for not for the pros, for anybody, for your 5-year-olds all the way up to your 50, 60-year-olds. And that really resonated as an important factor with big orgs, to say, well, yes, the island's got maybe infrastructure and it's got all these other things, but if you're not doing things authentically and you're not creating safe spaces for the future generation, then I'm not going to make that jump to consider you as a space in the esports ecosystem where I can go and do whatever that may be. So I rambled a little bit, but we'd like to do both, but we're taking our time and making sure it's done authentically. Because I think if it's done anything in esports, if you do it authentically, whether or not it's opening up a kick-ass esports bar and venue in London or a huge facility in Philly, if you've done it authentically and it resonates across the whole space, then people will come. So yeah, I don't know if I've answered that question, dude.
Yeah, a little roundabout, but I think we got there. Kimmo, I think that you have such an interesting history in how you got this position at the city of Espoo and what Espoo wants to do in not only Finland, but also in the esports space. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you came into this, and then talk about how Espoo wants to develop in the greater esports ecosystem.
Yeah, so like a short recap. So I originally came to the city of Espoo at the end of 2019 to a youth work project concerning esports and gaming, and because esports in Finland in the past has been really, in the public sector, really youth work driven. Like the Finnish youth work has worked around esports for 10 years now, Espoo for 8, like active grassroots things. So I was hired in a project to see if there's more to esports than youth work, which is kind of a weird question. You're like, of course there is, but I had to set out and to prove that there are a lot of things that are of interest to businesses in Espoo, to citizens of Espoo, about esports as a bigger phenomenon, and that it could be interest to somebody outside of Espoo to actually lure them in. And with the city officials and my project team, we went through different examples in Europe, in international level, and Finland, to look at different examples, and the city agreed that there's so much things in esports, the sports part, the businesses, the pathways to careers, where you look from education to, you can go to high schools, universities. They understood, we need to understand the whole picture. We can't just focus on something small and a small part of the whole ecosystem. So they decided that they actually needed someone to do that work and create a strategy and map out what the perfect ecosystem for Espoo would be. And I started in that position in January. And for the Espoo, it's basically, originally we have been looking at what Espoo already has in esports, what kind of small organizations, what universities, what schools do, what things. And the city found out that a lot of things are going on in Espoo. The city just doesn't know about anything. Like the international organizations doing like university challenges with Asian universities, and nobody knew anything. So they were like, God damn, this is happening. And now we are looking at what are the first places we have to work on. And it's become quite clear that sports is one, esports as a sport, what kind of support it needs. Then it's education, and then it's the career paths, because we can see that those will have the biggest impact on the youth, and we can have the biggest effect as a city for putting our resources there in the first place.
So it sounds like that youth is sort of the target, as you sort of said, of the development of the esports program in Espoo. And not only that, but educating people about the possibilities of esports, correct?
Yeah, it's mainly youth, but of course, like, businesses aren't run by 18-year-olds mostly. There are companies, and like already existing big tech companies exist in Espoo, and gaming companies. You can look at Supercell and companies like that, and they are interested in esports. And previously, the city did not have anyone they could talk to. Nobody understood what they wanted, so they just sat there waiting for something to happen. So.
Yeah. So, and also what you were saying, and this is a question that I want to open up to everybody. Something that you were saying, Kimmo, about that the city was interested in embracing esports as a way to attract people to the city, correct? As a way of making the city potentially more interesting, or maybe tourists. And as we know that there are a lot of larger cities or big events draw big crowds, and that is big tourism money, and cities like that, no matter what, not no matter what, but for many reasons, this is very positive for cities to have conventions or events and have people coming in from out of town and spending their money and building a thriving atmosphere.
Yeah.
But outside of this tourism aspect, I'm curious, what are some aspects of the esports, or what are some aspects of your locale that involving esports is enhancing? For you, you're saying that Espoo sort of had a sports infrastructure already, but what are some other aspects?
The other main aspect is what it's enhancing is the education, because there the institutions are really interested. They are able to see it in like projects the students are able to pull off. They're able to see that you can actually learn skills, like working life skills around esports, and it's it's more than just being a career in professional gaming. If you look at streaming and other business opportunities around the esports phenomenon, that's what's been really that's something that has raised a lot of interest in the education sector, and they are looking at ways of integrating the esports related phenomenon and esports into their already existing programs. And that's like one thing that can actually make universities in Espoo more appealing to international students and students in Finland. So Espoo is able to pull more people, and on top of pulling them in to study in Espoo, they would stay there, because Espoo is able to offer with the university something that other cities aren't able to offer.
Right. Like, you can come to Espoo, you can study, and then you can stay because there are jobs there this thing that you just studied.
Yeah, there are jobs, and with like esports, it's just it's more that you also have to think outside your career. Like if you want to live somewhere because you like outdoor exercising, you like outdoors, you're gonna pick a place to live where the outdoor facilities and there's a lot of nature. If you like gaming and esports, the place you live in has to offer that to like feed your soul and outside the working day. And like bringing that to the equation, if you work at any field, you can work as an engineer, as a teacher, but if the city or your location you live in is able to offer you experiences in esports and gaming, that's something you value.
Yeah. Taryn, I know that Philly, I mean, not just me, I think a lot of people know that Philly has a really broad sports culture and also an arts scene. And so I'm curious to see curious to hear actually how Nerd Street's involvement there in the city is enhancing any of that.
So I think with us, we just really want to be a complement to the city, and we want to be a tool for the city citizens to be able to come experience esports, either if we're having an event and they want to be a spectator, or if they want to actually participate in anything. But we also want to go from that grassroots level too, right? We're offering summer camps on a daily or on a summer basis. They're continually sold out because this is something that, parents they know that their kids want to do it, but they're not sure. So how do you incentivize the kid to understand that it might not just be sitting in front of a PC? It's actually, there's a lot of different components that go through it, including physical exercise. And I think too, aside from that, it's more of an after school program, a safe space for kids to go to where they can come after school and really get that one-on-one attention. But I think more than that, it's how do you work with each individual city and understand the needs of their citizens? I forget who said it, but I think esports, their communities are extremely, they're defensive, and I think rightfully so. But how do you embrace the new with the old and make it in a way that complements each other instead of being polarizing? So we're trying to do that by knocking into parks and rec departments across the country, using our local host facilities that, again, we're going to be having about 70 in the next 4 years. How do we incentivize high schools and schools to be able to come to us? A lot of times with schools, they might have an esports program, but it's either a teacher that has an interest in it or a teacher that's willing to volunteer. That doesn't make a coach. So how do we also train these people into being coaches and being able to speak to a way that is empowering their kids to then get that opportunity, and empowering that teacher, frankly, to have a different skill set that they might be interested in?
Yeah, and I think it's super interesting that Nerd Street has sort of found its like a foothold with the Parks and Rec department. That is where you guys are getting finding a lot of progress by attaching yourself, or like really working very closely with that, I guess, Department of Government, right? And across
Absolutely.
not only across Philly, but across.
Yeah, and I think, governments are willing to learn. They really are. It's just they need to be told how these things specifically work. And it is a lot of handholding. It is a lot of education. I feel like most of my job is education. But once they understand and they see, we have our major event this upcoming weekend for CSGO, Philadelphia. Once people actually come in and see what an event looks like and they see that there's actually spectators, they get it. For the first time ever in America, a 12-year-old's favorite sport isn't the NFL, it's Fortnite. It's happening whether they like it or not. They either are going to jump forward and be incentivized towards changing something, or they're not. And unfortunately, with the rising violence across different cities, how do we incentivize kids to understand that there's other options for them than being on the streets? So getting kids in a safe space is a huge component for us as well.
And so, Taryn, you're working closely through the Parks and Rec department. With Espoo, Kimmo, you are working directly with the government, and same with you, Chris, working directly with the Isle of Man, the digital Isle of Man government. I have a question for you, Tomaso. Are you really working very closely with the London, like the City of London, or just any governing body within London, or as a sort of more hospitality focused business, are you sort of on your own in terms of the impact you're trying to make?
A lot more on our own, definitely. We've had a few chat with some of kind of London's public ventures initiatives to try and understand what we're doing, and London is trying to promote the city as being kind of the mecca of competition in general. So there's kind of long-standing competition across the big cities of Europe, who's the kind of the capital of competition, and London with Wembley Stadium in the London's history about hosting some of the largest events and having some of the best competitors is trying to meet that. But I don't think the city is yet ready to fully understand and support the right businesses for that. So yeah, we're a lot more on our own. Our impact is a lot more kind of confined to the four walls of our first unit in London. What I can say in terms of trying to push the industry forward is so in our site we have kind of casual social gaming, kind of couches gaming with a bunch of consoles, and then we have an esports stage. A lot of our customers are coming in for the casual gaming, so usually our customers are either used to play or play sometimes or have never played before, and they come in and they play like accessible game like Mario Kart or Mario Party or FIFA, stuff like that. But they see the esports stage and they get intrigued by that. So for a lot of our customers, coming into platform and seeing an esports stage with the screens and esports being broadcasted live is their first interaction with esports. And I think this is quite an interesting space for us, is even though we're not focusing on those people, we want to be the first kind of brand they see as they go into esports. So no, we don't work with government. We try and work with different gaming communities. Obviously, there's two big teams in London with XL Esports and Fnatic having their headquarters in London. But yeah, our bread and butter is a lot more about the kind of casual gaming space, definitely.
Yeah, it's such a different. Everyone has such different, not only hurdles but also benefits in how close they are to the government. Chris, I know that Isle of Man has a sort of first in your work government in having a being sort of the first government to sponsor an esports organization. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So we sponsored X7, which initially was a League of Legends rostered team that entered into the UKEL. They approached us. I mean, we knew of them, and the owner previously he'd ran teams within the Belong Arena tournaments many years ago, and it came at the right time because I think we'd convinced and identified champions locally who outside of government, which was really important. But it all comes back down to that authenticity approach. So if we are trying to attract all sorts of businesses to the island and players to the island, but also win the hearts and minds of gamers locally, being able to, as a government, being able to get behind a professional org was super important. And me and my colleagues and my CEO within the department, we championed it and said, look, this is the right move. And the ripple effects we've already seen, it's been resonated across the industry. Will we be sponsoring other orgs in the future? Maybe, maybe not. Would I like to see other sort of silos within different governments outside the Isle of Man taking that same approach? I think absolutely. I think it's worked really well for us, and it's definitely put us on the map for as a government which is actually taking it seriously. We're not just following the crowd because esports is exciting and it's the latest trend. We're doing it right and putting our money where our mouth is.
And elaborating on that a little bit, Chris, I'm curious to know what sort of, we're talking a lot about like benefits, but I want to talk and acknowledge a little bit about the difficulties. What are some improvements that you can speak on in terms of not only just working in the government, or working with the government, but in the local acceptance of esports, or just how things are working where you are based? What are some improvements that you wish were happening sooner?
I'm really envious of people like Taryn and on the other side of the pond in the US, because you guys have got a great track record in scholastic programs and after school programs. I think the US has got a really good track record in that. The challenge that I have and my colleagues have on the Isle of Man is you speak to people in the tech space, and the Isle of Man is known as an e-gaming kind of location. We've got some of the biggest e-gaming companies headquartered here. And the biggest challenge that I had initially was both locally saying, look, esports is not e-gaming, but also when I was approaching other brands or orgs or other people outside of the island saying, hey, look, we're here, we're committed to esports. And their initial reaction sometimes would be, oh, you mean you're looking at an e-gaming spinoff or a gambling spinoff? Because the island's so well known in that space. We've done very well. So that's a constant challenge for me. And because there's so many local people and ultimately parents that are employed in the e-gaming sector, who may not understand that there is it is a total difference between e-gaming, stroke gambling, and esports. I've still got quite a lot of education to do. It's getting better, but that's probably one of the biggest challenges and hurdles I have for myself.
Kimmo, what about for you? Other than you have so much education ahead of you, and you were talking a little bit about before about you have a lot of old guard in place, but I don't know if you want to speak a little bit more on that or touch on anything else.
Yeah, I mean, of course, when you work for the city, there are the normal hurdles everybody knows from the public sector. It's low, there's bureaucracy, but that's part of the game when you sit on this side of the table. But like the biggest challenges I face that is that, like, in Finland at least, the city departments are kind of like silos. So there's an invisible wall. So the breaking the inner walls of the city departments is the key thing to do, and that's what I have been basically doing for 2 years. Like every day, I have to come up for reasons why I exist at some meetings, which tells you the story that I have to. There has to be a reason for my existence in somewhere, why I'm there. So that's just shows you why I talked about the old guard, because when you get to a meeting even about something like digitalization, then you ask, well, why gaming? Why should you do code? That's useful. So they don't really see the possibility of esports as a whole yet. So I have to educate them a lot to see that how many like life skills you can learn by team games. It can lead to something. It can lead to coding. It can lead to a career in tech. And then, of course, on the other hand, because I work at the sports department, it's the sports part. How do you fit esports next to ice hockey, which is again a big thing in Finland, because they like to look esports through the lens of traditional sports, and that doesn't really work for esports. So I have to basically pave the road and help them to see past the initial idea they get of esports. That it's more than sitting down, just sitting, like Taryn said, about keeping yourself healthy, active. It has an effect. If you want to be a pro gamer, you you want to have a career in esports, you actually have to do a lot of things. And the biggest thing I do is educate on these, because it shows people that it's a good thing. Like gaming as its core and esports are good things, and they shouldn't be tarnished by one or two small like bad examples people can find or see in the news. Because the image people get from horrible gaming addiction, and now if you look at the Chinese policy of 3 hours, and people are talking to me in Finland, look, this is where we are heading. Like, no, no, that's it won't work, and it doesn't. There's like no merit to the argument. But yeah,
Yeah,
I can
Tomaso,
resonate
do you
with that
have
one.
also?
Yeah. Sorry.
Yeah, go for
Sorry,
it.
Kerry. I'd be interested to see. I know I don't want to hijack the panel, but what the rest of the panel thinks about that, and whether or not that's come up in conversation with regards to the news from China. I've definitely, by the sounds of things, had the same conversations, Kimmo, coming in my way. What about yourself, Taryn, Tomaso?
I think America is very forward in playing as much as possible, especially today. No, but I think to your point, like I think everyone is thinking about it, and it's definitely a point of conversation. But we're just trying to motivate people to understand, like it's like anything else, right? Everything in moderation, and everything is you get what you put in, what you put out. It's not going to be this glamorous thing all the time, but at the same time, if you put in the effort and the work in an efficient manner, you'll get to that point. And if you don't, you should think about a career there. But I think limiting is definitely something that I don't see happening here, at least anytime soon.
I do feel like it's a terrifying thought. The idea of having the government doing the parents' job in limiting their children and what they do and can't do. But yeah, I do think it's against at least my values. I think just like Taryn said, everything with moderation. You can die by drinking too much water. It's all about trying to control how much of it. And yeah, I think there's also this thing about gaming addiction is a thing, right? Like let's not think it's all roses. But it's about educating. It's usually younger people or people who have less opportunities in general who end up overplaying. So it's about focusing on educating young people about it and supporting the people who are a bit lost or maybe are have lost a sense of purpose and might be using gaming as a gateway for that.
Yeah, definitely.
Sorry, Kerry, you can have it back now.
No problem. No problem.
But also I think there's a huge social thing. I mean, yes, the pandemic is terrible, but I mean, I think it was a really good place for esports in a way, right? We did a tournament for LA Parks and Rec Department, and we had tremendous response from the parents that were like, "Thank you so much. My child has met his first friend in 6 months." Like, this isn't healthy to not have that social motivation. And now when parents are getting exposure to the good things that esports is promoting, that's going to be beneficial for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we all keep reading, and maybe some of us have kids as well that can speak on this, that this is like, gaming is not just gaming anymore. It is so social that you're mostly hanging out with your friends. You maybe log on and don't finish a mission or a quest or whatever. You're just messing around with your friends because this is how you can hang out together. And I mean, I think when we were all younger, we could do similar things, but we didn't have the internet, so you had to sit next to your buddy to do that. So yeah, I mean, it's just different times. Times are changing, folks. Speaking about time, we got just a little bit left, so I'm gonna hit these questions and just leave it to you guys to pick your own order in which you answer, because I was very heavy-handed in structuring this panel. So let's let some chaos happen. I'm going to put these two together. John Oliverius asks, putting it together, asking, in your guys' experience, are there cities or regions that are supporting developing esports tourism on any level through public finance, as in getting money from the governments, or through taxes or something of this nature? And part two of this is, what was sort of the investment pitch to cities to provide financing for local esports development?
I'm not sure I can take this one. I think there's probably some better positioned people in this call.
Well, I know that North Carolina is doing a really big job of really promoting esports. They're trying to be a big capital in America for esports. But to answer your question, I'm not positive on public money and where that's going and if it's going to esports. I do know that, we're very close with the Philadelphia Convention Bureau here that bids on specific larger events. And we want to be able to say, hey, host Worlds in Philadelphia and use our facility as a training facility, because I think that's where a lot of people get stuck, right? Yes, we can have a big facility, but where are the teams going to practice? We're also building a facility in LA. We aim to replicate that. We have a facility in Denver. So I think, we're just trying to work with cities to help them, because they know that this is something that they should be including on those RFPs, but they don't necessarily know how to go about answering some of these questions. So we're there to serve as a resource for cities, and work together to really tap these different events that necessarily couldn't tap into before.
Thanks so much, Taryn. Mo and Chris, you got anything to add on to that?
Only that, and I'm sure Kimmo can echo this one. It takes a whole boardroom of champions to lobby any government. I mean, I'm very fortunate that I work for a very forward-thinking government, but when it comes into creating a specific support scheme or support fund for one kind of sector, whether or not it's esports or something else, is challenging. It's extremely challenging. I think the important factor is to look at what existing support schemes, and whether or not it's financial aid or it's grants and grants assistance that you can utilize under the esports banner, rather than trying to create new ones. I think we're still early days. It's very challenging to do that. I don't know if you agree, Kimmo.
I agree that, I agree 100%. From the city point of view, there are grant schemes, event support, club financial support. You can technically, in Espoo, you can technically use all of those for esports, because it's not disallowed. So there are chances you can take in Finland, in the Nordics, to apply for the basic event support, whatever for music events get, and use it for esports. So there's really no point of trying to create a new scheme, and I don't think that's you shouldn't look there. You shouldn't look there before it's 100% necessary, that you can't get it done any other way, because there might be some political resistance or something like that, so that you have to make an actually new tool. But you should be very careful when creating new tools, because if you create new tools with public money and it turns out it was really not that successful, you're gonna hear about it.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, we are nearing the end.
Sorry.
Oh, go for it, please.
I just have one quick thing to add about Philadelphia. They are unique in that their Parks and Rec department actually pays on behalf of their students. So we were able to do a partnership with them where they offered a 2-week summer camp for their citizens, and they're paying on behalf of this. So that is definitely coming from public money. But more than that, they did a youth development project with them. Like I was talking about earlier, we need to teach the kids what Discord is and all of these different platforms. How do we do that? We empower rec leaders to then go back to their centers to then teach the kids. How do we train them? So we had a training program for these specific youth development leaders to give them a coach and training program to allow them access to understand these platforms, to then go back, teach their kids, and ultimately expand. And that way, if a kid's really interested, then they come to summer camp. Then they start competing, because they need to start to like it themselves. It's not as simple as throwing someone a basketball and saying, learn how to dribble. So learning from that grassroots level is extremely instrumental.
Leave it to Philadelphia to try to get that last word in there. Well, guys, it was my pleasure to moderate this panel. Thanks so much for spending your Wednesday evenings, afternoons, and mornings with me. I forgot to introduce myself at the beginning. I'm Kerry Waananen, multimedia content at Esports Insider. Thanks so much. Stick around. I think we have at least one more panel left. and we'll see you in chat.